Number: the universal access trap. The electronic beeping outside my home office should have been my first warning that Karen Whitfield was about to make the biggest mistake of her HOA presidency. But I was deep in code, designing security protocols for our city's emergency dispatch system, when that insistent, unauthorized sound shattered my Tuesday afternoon concentration. Through my window, I watched Karen wielding what looked like a universal access device against my smart gate lock, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair catching the sunlight as she jabbed at her mysterious gadget with growing frustration. The satisfied smirk on her face told me she expected this device to grant her entry to any property in Pine Ridge Estates. What she didn't know was that I designed my security system myself, and every failed attempt was being logged in real time. When her device finally gave up with a defeated beep, Karen's expression shifted from confidence to fury. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice carrying clearly across my yard. "I'm calling to report a resident interfering with official HOA inspection procedures." I smiled quietly and picked up my own phone. After 5 years of building the emergency dispatch systems that kept our city running, I knew exactly who would answer that call. "Jenny," I said to my sister at dispatch, "you're about to get an interesting report." What happened next would turn Karen's moment of perceived triumph into the beginning of her complete downfall. Number. The foundation I'd built. My name is Marcus Rodriguez, and I never intended to become the neighborhood's last line of defense against HOA tyranny. When I moved to Pine Ridge Estates 3 years ago, I was simply a cybersecurity engineer looking for a quiet place to work from home while consulting for the city's emergency services department. The house at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive offered everything I needed: space for my equipment, fiber internet, and what I thought was a reasonable HOA that would maintain property values without interfering in residents' lives. The property came with an interesting history. The previous owner, a retired engineer named Harold Chen, had installed an elaborate smart home system that integrated security cameras, automated locks, and environmental controls. When Harold moved to be closer to his grandchildren, he'd offered to sell me the house along with complete documentation of his security setup. "You'll appreciate the engineering," he told me during our walkthrough. "Just remember the system logs everything." I'd enhanced Harold's foundation considerably, integrating my home security with the same protocols I used for the city's critical infrastructure. My background in cybersecurity meant I understood not just how to protect digital systems, but how to detect and analyze attempted intrusions. Every electronic interaction with my property was recorded, time-stamped, and automatically backed up to secure servers. The HOA seemed manageable initially. Eleanor Whitfield, the long-serving president, ran monthly meetings with gentle efficiency and focused on genuinely important issues like street maintenance and landscaping standards. Dues were reasonable, violations were rare, and most residents appreciated the balance between community standards and personal freedom. Everything changed 18 months ago when Eleanor's daughter-in-law Karen took over as president. Eleanor had reportedly developed early-stage dementia and moved to assisted living, leaving Karen to manage her affairs and assume leadership of the association. The transition seemed natural enough. Karen was organized, technologically savvy, and claimed to have her mother-in-law's full authorization for modernizing HOA operations. But Karen's version of modernization quickly revealed itself as systematic overreach disguised as efficiency improvement. Number, the escalation campaign. Karen's transformation of Pine Ridge Estates began subtly, with new policies introduced as updates to reflect modern best practices. She'd acquired what she called digital compliance verification equipment and announced mandatory inspections to ensure all smart home systems met updated community standards. The first red flag came when Mrs. Chen Harold's elderly neighbor, 2 blocks over, mentioned Karen's unexpected visit. She showed up with some kind of scanning device. Mrs. Chen had told me during our casual conversation over the shared fence line, said she needed to verify my home security system for compliance with new smart home regulations. When I asked to see the written authorization, she got quite snippy and said everything was documented in her device. Similar reports trickled in through our informal neighborhood network. The Johnsons received a visit where Karen insisted her new technology gave her unprecedented access to private property for inspection purposes. The Martinez family was told their outdoor cameras violated privacy regulations that didn't exist in our HOA charter. Each incident followed the same pattern. Karen would arrive with official-looking equipment, claim authority she didn't possess, and become aggressive when residents questioned her credentials. The harassment intensified over the following months. Karen began issuing violation notices for infractions that seemed deliberately designed to be expensive and difficult to remedy. The Hendersons received a $500 fine for unauthorized architectural modifications because their new doorbell camera was allegedly installed without HOA approval, despite no such requirement existing in our governing documents. Young parents were cited for playground equipment that had been approved by previous administrations. Most disturbing were reports of Karen attempting to access properties when residents weren't home. Multiple neighbors mentioned finding evidence that someone had been testing their locks, gates, and security systems during work hours. When confronted, Karen would claim she was conducting routine maintenance verification or responding to anonymous safety complaints. 3 months ago, the pattern became unmistakably predatory. Karen began targeting the neighborhood's most valuable properties with increasingly aggressive enforcement actions. The Hendersons, whose waterfront lot was worth nearly twice their original purchase price, suddenly faced multiple violations requiring immediate costly remediation. When they protested, Karen produced documentation claiming Eleanor Whitfield had personally authorized expanded enforcement procedures. Jake Morrison, our retired attorney neighbor, grew suspicious when Karen presented voice recordings of Eleanor supposedly approving new inspection protocols. "I've known Eleanor for 15 years. Jake told me privately. "That recording sounds like her, but something about the phrasing and inflection feels off. It's too perfect, too formal for how Eleanor actually speaks." The breaking point came when Karen issued me a violation notice for unauthorized security system modifications that interfere with community safety protocols. The notice claimed my integrated security setup violated new regulations requiring HOA access to all electronic systems for emergency verification. The fine was $2,500, with additional daily penalties until I provided Karen's inspection team with administrative access to my home's digital infrastructure. That's when I realized Karen had made a critical error. She targeted someone who not only understood the technical aspects of her operation, but had the professional credentials and system access to expose it completely. Number. The preparation phase. Jake Morrison's request to analyze Karen's supposed authorization recordings opened my eyes to the sophistication of her deception. Using audio analysis software I developed for detecting fraudulent emergency calls, I quickly identified telltale signs of artificial voice synthesis. The recordings weren't just edited, they were completely fabricated using advanced AI voice cloning technology. This discovery led me to examine Karen's equipment more carefully. Based on my observations during her failed attempt to access my gate, I had already suspected her device was designed for unauthorized system penetration rather than legitimate inspection. The irregular beeping patterns, the way she had to repeatedly reposition the device, and the complete lack of proper authentication protocols all pointed to RFID cloning technology. I reached out to my contacts in law enforcement to verify my suspicions. Detective Sarah Chen, whom I'd worked with on several cybersecurity consultations for the department, confirmed that similar devices had been used in property fraud schemes across the region. "We've been tracking a pattern of HOA-related property theft," Sarah told me during our confidential consultation. "Fraudsters use technology to create false authority and manipulate homeowners into compliance. Your documentation could be crucial evidence." The most important preparation was coordinating with my sister Jenny at emergency dispatch. As the afternoon shift supervisor, Jenny managed all 911 calls for our district and had access to real-time authorization databases for city personnel. We'd worked together on emergency protocol improvements, and she understood both the technical and legal implications of unauthorized access attempts. If someone claims official authority for property access, I can verify their credentials instantly, Jenny explained during our planning conversation. More importantly, if they're using fraudulent devices near critical infrastructure, I have the authority to implement immediate security countermeasures. My final preparation involved documenting everything meticulously. Every interaction with Karen, every violation notice, every attempted access to my security system had been automatically logged and backed up. I'd also installed additional cameras specifically to capture her inspection attempts, ensuring multiple angles and high-resolution audio recording. By the time Karen arrived for her unauthorized inspection attempt, I was ready to turn her technological advantage against her completely. Number. The moment of truth. Watching Karen fumble with her malfunctioning device while my security system logged her every attempt, I felt the calm satisfaction of a well-executed plan coming together. Her frustrated jabbing at the unresponsive screen told me the remote lockdown protocol had worked perfectly. The same emergency countermeasures designed to protect city infrastructure from cyber attacks had just neutralized her fraudulent access device. "Good afternoon, Karen," I called out as I approached the gate, maintaining respectful distance while staying within range of my security cameras. "Having some technical difficulties?" Her practiced HOA president persona snapped back into place, though I caught that flash of embarrassment before she recovered. "Marcus Rodriguez, perfect timing. I'm conducting routine digital compliance verification as mandated by our updated community guidelines. This device provides me with authorized access to all smart home systems within Pine Ridge for inspection purposes." "Interesting," I replied, genuinely curious about her technology despite knowing exactly what it was. "Can you show me the authorization documentation for that device? I'd love to see how it interfaces with private security systems." Karen's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "The authorization is built into the system itself, Marcus. The HOA board invested significantly in this technology to streamline our oversight responsibilities. Now, if you'll just allow me to complete the scan, I appreciate the innovation, but I'll need to see some paperwork first. Standard procedure, you understand?" I gestured toward her earpiece's active LED. "Also, I noticed you're broadcasting this interaction. Are you live streaming right now?" Her eyes lit up with satisfaction. "As a matter of fact, yes. Transparency in HOA operations is crucial, don't you think? Our community members deserve to see how some residents respond when we're simply trying to maintain property values and safety standards." I addressed her phone camera directly. "I'm not trying to be uncooperative. I'm just asking for proper documentation before allowing access to my private property. I'm sure your viewers would agree that homeowners have the right to verify credentials before granting access." The device in her hand beeped again, and I watched her grip tighten with frustration. Through my professional experience, I could see all the telltale signs of a device attempting to bypass rather than legitimately interface with security systems. "The documentation is all on file with the HOA," she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge as her device continued to fail. "Every homeowner received notification about these updated procedures. If you've chosen not to review your HOA communications, that's not my problem." I pulled out my phone and opened our HOA bylaws. "Karen, I've read every communication. Section 73 clearly states that property inspections require 48 hours advance written notice and must be conducted during reasonable hours with homeowner consent or a court order. I don't recall receiving any written notice. Furthermore," I continued, "that equipment you're using appears to be attempting RFID cloning rather than legitimate system interfacing. As someone who works in cybersecurity, I can tell you that what you're doing right now could potentially violate federal computer fraud statutes." Karen's face flushed and her carefully maintained composure cracked. "How dare you suggest that I'm doing anything illegal? I am the HOA president and I have every right to ensure compliance with community standards. This device was specifically acquired for official HOA business." Her device gave one final, frustrated beep before the screen went dark. She stared at it, jabbing desperately at the power button. "You know what? I've tried to handle this civilly, but clearly you're determined to obstruct legitimate HOA business. Fine. I'm calling 911 right now to report a resident interfering with official community oversight." "Go ahead and make that call, Karen," I said quietly. "I think you'll find the conversation very educational." Number, the perfect storm. Karen fumbled with her phone, ending the live stream with an aggressive swipe before dialing 911. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled slightly as she held the device to her ear, mentally rehearsing her complaint while I waited with genuine curiosity about how this would unfold. 911. "What's your emergency?" The voice that came through Karen's speaker was crisp, professional, and immediately familiar to me. Jenny Walsh, my younger sister, who'd been running dispatch operations for the past 3 years. Karen straightened her posture, adopting her official business voice. "Yes, this is Karen Whitfield, president of Penridge Estates Homeowners Association. I'm calling to report a resident who is interfering with official HOA inspection procedures. I'm at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive, and the homeowner is refusing to allow mandated property compliance verification." She shot me a triumphant look. clearly expecting this call to resolve things in her favor. The resident is being deliberately obstructive and may violate community regulations. Jenny's response was exactly what I'd hoped for. Ma'am, can you please clarify what type of inspection you're attempting to conduct? Are you representing a city department, county agency, or private organization? There was a pause as Karen processed the question, clearly not expecting to have her authority questioned by a 911 dispatcher. I'm the HOA president, Karen repeated, her voice taking on that sharp edge I'd heard before. I have full authority to conduct inspections within our community boundaries. The homeowner needs to comply with HOA regulations, and his refusal constitutes interference with official business. Ma'am, I need to verify some information. Can you hold for just a moment? Jenny's voice remained perfectly professional, but I caught the subtle shift that meant she was accessing her database systems. Also, is the homeowner present and willing to speak with dispatch? Karen's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Why would you need to speak with him? I'm the one filing the complaint. He's the one being uncooperative. But I was already stepping forward, extending my hand toward her phone. Karen, I'd be happy to clarify the situation with dispatch. Transparency, right? She clutched the phone protectively against her chest. Not, you'll just try to twist the facts and make me look like the problem here. But Jenny had heard our exchange through the phone speaker. Sir, if you're present, I'd like to hear your version of events. This is standard procedure for property dispute calls. I looked directly at Karen. Unless you have something to hide, I don't see why you'd object to me speaking with the dispatcher. The comment hit its mark. With her earlier live stream fresh in her mind and her commitment to transparency, she couldn't refuse without looking hypocritical. Reluctantly, she held out the phone. Jenny, this is Marcus Rodriguez. I'm the homeowner at this address, I said, keeping my voice neutral and professional, not wanting to reveal our relationship just yet. Miss Whitfield appeared at my property today with an electronic device, claiming she had the authority to access my private security systems without prior notice or documentation. When I requested proper authorization, she became agitated. Mr. Rodriguez, can you describe the device Miss Whitfield was using? Jenny's question was perfectly reasonable from a dispatch perspective, but I knew she was gathering information for a different reason. It appeared to be some kind of RFID cloning device, possibly attempting to bypass electronic lock systems. The behavior pattern suggested unauthorized access attempts rather than legitimate interfacing protocols. Karen's face went pale as I provided the technical details. She hadn't expected me to understand the implications of her equipment. Jenny's response came after a brief pause. Mr. Rodriguez, based on your description and our database review, I'm going to need to create a formal incident report. Can you confirm your background for our records? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I'm a cybersecurity engineer with the city's Emergency Services Department, authorization code Alpha 77 Delta. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen stared at me with growing horror as the implications sank in. Jenny's voice returned, now carrying a different tone entirely. Confirmed. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm showing your clearance level in our system. Given the nature of the attempted unauthorized access, I'm implementing immediate protective protocols. What does that mean? Karen's voice cracked slightly. She was beginning to realize that this call hadn't gone according to her plan. Jenny's response was crisp and official. Ma'am, based on the technical assessment and the homeowner's professional credentials, I'm issuing a temporary suspension order for all unauthorized electronic access attempts in the affected area. Additionally, I'm required to notify relevant departments about potential violations of computer fraud statutes. I stepped closer to Karen's phone. Jenny, I'm requesting immediate lockdown of all unauthorized smart access devices within a 500-meter radius of this location. Authorization code Alpha 7 Delta. There was a brief pause before Jenny responded. Confirmed. Marcus. Implementing lockdown protocol now. Almost immediately, Karen's device emitted a sharp electronic chirp, and the screen flashed red before going completely dark. She stared at it in disbelief, pressing the power button repeatedly. What did you do? Why won't it turn on? Her voice was rising toward panic as she realized her expensive gadget had just been remotely disabled. Standard security protocol, I explained calmly. When unauthorized access devices are detected in proximity to critical infrastructure, they're automatically quarantined to prevent potential system breaches. Jenny's voice came through the phone speaker with official authority. Ms. Whitfield, you're required to cease all inspection activities pending verification of your legal authority. Any continued attempts to access private property without proper documentation may result in criminal charges. Karen's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I have every right to conduct inspections. But her protest sounded hollow now, especially with her device completely non-functional. Jenny's final statement sealed Karen's fate. Ma'am, HOA authority is limited to civil matters and requires proper legal procedures. What you've described constitutes attempted unauthorized access to private computer systems, which falls under federal jurisdiction. As Karen stood there clutching her dead device and staring at me with a mixture of rage and confusion, I could see her trying to process how a simple property inspection had turned into a federal computer crime investigation. She had no idea that this was just the beginning, and that her problems were about to get much more complicated. Now, Karen, I said quietly, shall we discuss those authorization documents you mentioned? Number, the complete unraveling. 3 hours later, the full scope of Karen's deception had been exposed in ways that exceeded even my expectations. Detective Sarah Chen's investigation, triggered by my emergency dispatch report, had uncovered not just local fraud, but connections to a sophisticated, multi-state operation targeting homeowner associations across the country. Jake Morrison arrived with audio analysis that proved Karen's authorization recordings were AI-generated deepfakes. Eleanor Whitfield, supposedly suffering from advanced dementia, turned out to be perfectly lucid and living in isolation at Sunset Manor, where Karen had been controlling her communications for 18 months while forging documents and stealing nearly $200,000 from community funds. The USB drive from Karen's disabled device contained evidence of a network coordinated by someone called the Consultant, who had been teaching HOA board members across 6 states how to exploit homeowner associations for personal profit. Financial records showed Karen had spent nearly $50,000 of HOA money on illegal surveillance equipment purchased through a shell corporation she'd created, specifically for the scheme. But perhaps the most satisfying revelation came when Eleanor herself appeared at the impromptu community meeting we'd organized in my driveway. Far from the confused elderly woman Karen had described, Eleanor was sharp, articulate, and had been secretly recording every conversation with her daughter-in-law for over a year. Karen thought she was so clever, using technology to create an information advantage over her neighbors, Eleanor told the gathering of residents who'd come to witness Karen's arrest. But she underestimated the power of patience, careful documentation, and the willingness of a community to stand together against systematic abuse. As Detective Chen Reed Karen Hare writes computer fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy charges carrying a potential sentence of 7 years federal prison, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a system working exactly as designed. Karen had used technology to try to exploit and control her community. In the end, that same technology had provided the evidence needed to expose her completely. The FBI investigation that followed Karen's arrest led to the dismantling of the entire network, with 37 arrests across 6 states and the recovery of over $2 million in fraudulent proceeds. The consultant turned out to be a disbarred attorney who had been recruiting disgruntled HOA board members and providing them with the tools and training needed to systematically defraud their communities. 6 months later, Penridge Estates had transformed from a community living under HOA tyranny into a model of transparent democratic governance. We dissolved the traditional association structure and created the Pine Ridge Community Cooperative, with rotating leadership, completely transparent finances, and a digital platform that allowed every homeowner to participate in community decisions. The technology that Karen had used to try to exploit us became the foundation for protecting other communities facing similar schemes. I had been contacted by neighborhoods in 3 states dealing with suspicious HOA enforcement, and the analytical techniques we developed during our investigation had already led to 2 additional federal cases. Eleanor, now back in her own home and serving as our community's unofficial historian, summed it up perfectly during our weekly coffee meeting. Karen's greatest failure might turn out to be creating the expertise needed to stop people like her. The irony was perfect. Karen's attempt to use authority and technology to force me out of my neighborhood had instead created a network of protection for vulnerable communities nationwide. Her sophisticated scheme had accidentally built the very system needed to defend against others like her. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you plant, it's what grows naturally from someone else's overreach. Karen learned that lesson from a federal prison cell, while the rest of us learned something far more valuable: that communities are naturally cooperative when they're not being manipulated by people with hidden agendas. The universal access device that couldn't unlock my gate had unlocked something far more important: the power of technology used transparently in service of community protection rather than individual exploitation. And that was a door Karen could never close again.